Fame has a way of freezing people in time, turning lives into headlines and legacies into short summaries. But when the cameras fade and the applause ends, what remains is something far more human. Behind every familiar name are years of quiet work, private battles, and moments the public never sees. This week, we pause to remember 10 lives that shaped culture, art, sports, and history in ways both visible and unseen. Some were celebrated on the world's biggest stages. Others worked steadily, leaving influence rather than spotlight. Each story carries weight, meaning, and a legacy worth honoring. As we reflect on their journeys, take a moment with us, and if thoughtful remembrance matters to you, staying with the channel is always appreciated. Now, let us begin with a life that left a lasting mark on the screen. To many viewers, Isiah Whitlock Jr. will always be remembered as a commanding presence on television, a performer whose voice and posture alone could signal authority. His portrayal of Clay Davis on The Wire became one of the show's most recognizable elements, not because of spectacle, but because of restraint. He brought weight to every scene, turning political corruption into something unsettlingly human. Long before that role defined him, Whitlock built his career steadily, often away from the spotlight. Trained in theater, he approached acting as craft rather than celebrity. Colleagues frequently described him as disciplined and meticulous, someone who treated every part, large or small, with equal seriousness. That mindset followed him across stage, television, and film, where he appeared in a wide range of projects without ever chasing the spotlight for its own sake. In The Wire, his performance stood out precisely because it avoided exaggeration. Clay Davis was not a caricature. He was believable, unsettling, and familiar. Whitlock understood the quiet power of understatement, allowing pauses, glances, and rhythm to do the work. Off-screen, he maintained a reputation for professionalism, rarely courting publicity and preferring to let the work speak for itself. Beyond television, Whitlock continued to appear in films that expanded his range, from dark satire to historical drama. Yet despite these credits, he remained grounded, often speaking about acting as a long-term commitment rather than a moment of fame. Those who worked alongside him recalled a man deeply invested in storytelling, respectful of the process, and generous with younger performers. Near the end of his life, Whitlock stepped away from the public eye, leaving behind a body of work that quietly shaped modern television drama. He passed away on the 30th of December 2025 at the age of 71. His death was reported without public disclosure of a specific cause, and no official location was announced. What remains clear is the legacy he left behind. Performances defined not by noise or excess, but by control, depth, and lasting impact. Carmen de Lavallade belonged to a rare generation of performers whose careers were defined not by trends, but by endurance. To audiences, she was elegance in motion, an artist whose presence carried history, discipline, and quiet authority. Her work bridged worlds that often remained separate, moving seamlessly between modern dance, classical stages, Broadway, film, and television. Her journey began far from the spotlight she would later command. Trained rigorously in dance, she developed a style rooted in precision and emotional control. Early in her career, she performed with some of the most respected institutions in American dance, earning recognition not for spectacle, but for depth. On stage, her movements were restrained yet expressive, conveying meaning without excess. As her career expanded, de Lavallade refused to be confined to a single discipline. She appeared on Broadway, performed at New York's Metropolitan Opera, and worked with renowned dance companies, including the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater. In film and television, she brought that same measured intensity, often portraying characters with dignity and inner strength. Even when roles were limited, her performances left lasting impressions. What set de Lavallade apart was longevity. While many dancers stepped away as their bodies aged, she continued performing well into her later years. Colleagues spoke of her unwavering commitment to practice, her respect for the craft, and her belief that artistry did not diminish with time. For younger performers, she became a living example of how discipline and passion could sustain a lifetime in the arts. In her final years, she remained a symbol of artistic perseverance, someone whose career spanned decades without losing integrity. Carmen de Lavallade passed away on the 29th of December 2025 at the age of 94. She died at a hospital in Englewood, New Jersey, following a short illness. Her passing marked the quiet close of a life devoted entirely to movement, expression, and the enduring power of performance. Sidney Kibrick was part of an era when Hollywood discovered its youngest stars early and expected them to grow up in front of the camera. To generations of viewers, his face remains tied to the Our Gang short films of the 1,930 seconds, where he appeared as Jawann, the loyal sidekick to the neighborhood bully, Butch. These films became staples of American entertainment, shaping early comedy and introducing child actors to national audiences. Kibrick entered the industry at a time when child performers were treated as working professionals long before the term was widely understood. On screen, his performances were natural and unforced, fitting seamlessly into the rhythm of ensemble storytelling that defined Our Gang. While his role was not always central, his presence contributed to the balance and realism that made the series resonate with audiences across decades. As Hollywood evolved, so did Kibrick's life. Unlike many former child actors whose later years were marked by public struggles, he made a deliberate choice to step away from the entertainment industry. Leaving acting behind, he pursued a career in real estate, building a life that existed almost entirely outside the public eye. It was a quiet transition, one that reflected his desire for stability rather than continued fame. In later years, Kibrick was often remembered less for celebrity and more for historical significance. He became the last surviving regular cast member of Our Gang, a living link to a foundational chapter of American film history. Film historians and classic movie fans alike recognized him as a rare connection to Hollywood's earliest studio system and its formative years. Sidney Kibrick passed away on the 2nd of January 2026, at the age of 97. He died at a hospital in Los Angeles, California. No specific cause of death was publicly disclosed. His passing marked the end of an era, closing the final chapter on a generation of performers who helped shape early screen comedy and left behind a legacy preserved in film rather than headlines. Richard Smallwood's influence on gospel music was profound, even for listeners who may not have known his name at first. His compositions became part of the emotional fabric of worship, carried by choirs, churches, and voices across generations. Rather than pursuing mainstream fame, Smallwood devoted his life to music rooted in faith, discipline, and spiritual depth. Trained formally in classical music, he brought structure and sophistication to gospel at a time when the genre was evolving rapidly. His arrangements were known for their complexity, yet they never felt distant. Instead, they invited participation, drawing singers and congregations into a shared emotional experience. For many, his music was not simply performed, it was lived. Among his most enduring works was Total Praise, a song that transcended denominational boundaries and became a modern gospel standard. Its steady build and restrained power reflected Smallwood's philosophy as a composer: clarity over excess, meaning over volume. Other songs followed the same path, earning respect from musicians who recognized the precision behind the emotion. Smallwood's work reached wider audiences when his music crossed into popular culture, including a notable moment when one of his songs was performed by Whitney Houston in The Preacher's Wife. Yet even as his compositions gained visibility, he remained focused on purpose rather than recognition. Those who worked with him often described a man deeply committed to excellence, preparation, and the spiritual responsibility he believed music carried. In his later years, Smallwood's health declined quietly, away from public attention. He passed away on the 30th of December, 2025, at the age of 77. He died of kidney failure at a nursing facility in Sandy Spring, Maryland. His passing marked the loss of a composer whose legacy lives not in charts or awards, but in the voices of countless people who continue to sing his music in moments of reflection, gratitude, and faith. Jim McBride built his career far from the spotlight, in the quiet rooms where songs are shaped long before they ever reach a stage or a radio. As a songwriter, his voice was not defined by performance, but by craft. He understood how to tell stories that felt personal while still speaking to millions, a skill that made him a respected figure in Nashville for decades. McBride's writing was rooted in observation rather than spectacle. He focused on everyday emotions, longing, pride, memory, and regret, placing them into melodies that felt familiar without being predictable. This approach made his songs enduring, allowing them to live beyond trends or eras. Industry peers often noted his ability to balance simplicity with emotional weight, a balance that is difficult to achieve and even harder to sustain. His most recognized work came through a long collaboration with Alan Jackson, one of country music's defining artists. Together, they co-wrote songs that became part of the genre's modern foundation, including Chattahoochee, Chasing That Neon Rainbow, and Someday. These songs captured a distinctly American sense of place and nostalgia, resonating with listeners who saw their own lives reflected in the lyrics. Despite the success of his catalog, McBride remained known as a songwriter's songwriter, respected within the industry, but rarely seeking public attention. He was inducted into the Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame, an acknowledgement that reflected peer recognition rather than commercial ambition. Those who worked alongside him described a steady presence, someone committed to the process and protective of the integrity of the work. In the final chapter of his life, McBride's passing marked the quiet end of a career defined by consistency and influence rather than celebrity. He died on the 6th of January 2026, at the age of 78. No specific cause of death or location was publicly disclosed. His legacy continues through the songs he left behind, stories that remain alive each time they are played, remembered, and sung again. Tatiana Schlossberg lived a life shaped by words, inquiry, and a deep sense of responsibility to the world around her. As an environmental journalist, she focused on stories that examined climate, science, and human impact subjects that demanded patience, clarity, and rigor rather than spectacle. Her writing reflected a commitment to understanding complexity, even when the answers were uncomfortable or incomplete. Raised in a family long associated with public service, Schlossberg chose a quieter path. Rather than relying on her famous lineage, she built her career through reporting and research, contributing to publications including the New York Times. Colleagues described her as thoughtful and precise, someone who approached journalism as a public trust rather than a platform for attention. Her work consistently emphasized evidence over opinion, inviting readers to reflect rather than react. In the final months of her life, Schlossberg shared a more personal form of writing that resonated far beyond environmental reporting. An essay published in The New Yorker detailed her experience living with cancer, offering an unfiltered reflection on illness, fear, and the shifting boundaries of identity. The piece was widely read not because it sought sympathy, but because it spoke honestly about vulnerability and uncertainty. Readers connected with its restraint, its refusal to dramatize pain, and its quiet insistence on dignity. That essay came to represent another side of her legacy, the ability to communicate complex emotions with clarity and grace. It revealed a writer who remained committed to truth, even when the subject was her own mortality. Friends and readers alike noted how her voice remained steady, curious, and compassionate to the very end. Tatiana Schlossberg passed away on the 30th of December 2025 at the age of 35 after battling leukemia. No specific location was publicly disclosed. Her life, though brief, left a lasting impression through work that valued understanding over noise and honesty over comfort. In journalism and beyond, her words continue to speak with quiet authority. Jacqueline embodied a kind of elegance that felt instinctive rather than constructed. To the public, she was a symbol of refined taste, someone whose presence alone suggested balance, restraint, and authority. In an industry often driven by excess, her approach to fashion stood apart, guided by proportion, confidence, and a deep understanding of form. Born into French aristocracy, Deribes moved easily within elite cultural circles, yet she was never defined solely by lineage. Fashion recognized her not only as a muse, but as a creator. Designers admired her eye for detail and her ability to shape silhouettes that felt timeless rather than trendy. When she turned to designing her own collections, her work reflected the same philosophy that guided her personal style: clarity, structure, and an absence of unnecessary ornamentation. Her designs were worn by some of the most recognizable figures in popular culture, including Joan Collins, Raquel Welch, and Cher. Yet Deribes herself remained the most compelling example of her vision. She dressed not to command attention, but to express certainty. Photographs of her across decades reveal consistency rather than reinvention, a quality that made her a reference point in a constantly shifting fashion landscape. Beyond clothing, Deribes represented an attitude toward beauty that valued composure over spectacle. She believed style was not about transformation, but about refinement. Those who worked with her described someone decisive and disciplined, with an unwavering sense of self. She understood that fashion could amplify presence, but never replace substance. In her later years, Deribes withdrew quietly from public life, leaving behind an influence that extended far beyond runway shows or magazine covers. She passed away on the 30th of December 2025, at the age of 96. She died at a hospital in Switzerland. No specific cause of death was publicly disclosed. Her legacy endures as a reminder that true style does not shout, it remains unmistakable and composed long after the moment has passed. Elle Simone Scott brought warmth, clarity, and quiet authority to the world of food media. To many viewers, she was a familiar presence on America's Test Kitchen, guiding audiences through recipes with patience and confidence. Her approach to cooking was never performative. Instead, it focused on precision, accessibility, and the belief that food should be both thoughtful and welcoming. Trained as a chef and food stylist, Scott understood the balance between creativity and discipline. On screen, she broke down complex techniques into manageable steps, emphasizing process over perfection. Viewers responded to her calm demeanor and clear explanations, qualities that made her a trusted voice in kitchens across the country. Behind the scenes, colleagues described her as meticulous, prepared, and deeply respectful of the craft. Beyond television, Scott's impact extended into mentorship and advocacy. She founded She Chef, an organization dedicated to supporting and uplifting women chefs of color in an industry that has historically offered limited visibility and opportunity. Through this work, she created space for others to grow, focusing on community rather than personal recognition. For many, her influence was felt not through fame, but through guidance and encouragement. Scott approached her career with purpose, viewing food as a bridge between culture, memory, and identity. She often spoke about the responsibility of representation, understanding that visibility carried weight. Her work reflected a commitment to excellence without ego and to leadership rooted in service rather than status. In the final chapter of her life, Scott faced illness with the same quiet resolve that defined her career. She passed away in January 2026 at the age of 49 after a battle with ovarian cancer. No specific location was publicly disclosed. Her death marked a profound loss to the culinary community, but her legacy remains visible in the kitchens she inspired, the chefs she mentored, and the audiences who learned to cook with confidence through her steady guidance. Jawann Oldham's life in basketball was defined not only by height and strength, but by commitment to the game across borders and generations. Standing 7 feet tall, he became a defining figure in Seattle basketball during an era when local programs produced national-level talent. To many in the city, Oldham represented discipline, resilience, and the belief that opportunity could grow from community roots. His early years were marked by dominance at Cleveland High School in the 1,970 seconds, where his presence on the court helped shape one of Seattle's most celebrated high school teams. That success carried him to Seattle University, where he continued to develop as a center known for physical play, rebounding, and consistency rather than flash. Coaches and teammates often described him as reliable and grounded, someone who focused on fundamentals over spectacle. Oldham went on to play in the NBA for 10 seasons, including stints with the Chicago Bulls and the Los Angeles Lakers. While he was never positioned as a headline star, his role was essential. He brought size, defense, and stability to the teams he joined, filling the kind of position that rarely draws attention but quietly holds systems together. His career reflected the reality of professional sports for many players: long, demanding, and defined by contribution rather than celebrity. After his playing days in the United States, Oldham extended his influence internationally. He helped establish and develop basketball leagues in South Korea and China, contributing to the global growth of the sport. This chapter of his life revealed a broader vision, one that viewed basketball not just as competition, but as a shared language capable of connecting cultures. Jawann Oldham passed away on the 5th of January 2026, at the age of 68. He died in Atlanta, Georgia. No specific cause of death was publicly disclosed. His legacy lives on not only in American gyms and arenas, but in the international courts, where the game continues to grow, shaped in part by his quiet dedication. Eva Schloss carried a life shaped by history's darkest chapter, yet she chose to spend her years transforming survival into testimony. Born in Austria and raised in Amsterdam, her childhood unfolded in the shadow of Nazi occupation. As a young Jewish girl during World War II, her life was interrupted abruptly by persecution, fear, and loss experiences that would define the rest of her journey. During the war, Schloss and her family were arrested and deported to Auschwitz. She survived the camp alongside her mother, enduring conditions designed to erase identity and hope. Many members of her family did not survive. After liberation, returning to ordinary life proved almost as difficult as survival itself. The trauma lingered, unspoken for years, as she struggled to reconcile memory with the expectation of moving forward. Her life became uniquely intertwined with history through circumstance rather than choice. After the war, her mother married Otto Frank, making Eva the stepsister of Anne Frank after Anne's death. While this connection brought public attention, Schloss resisted being defined by proximity to another story. Instead, she gradually found her own voice, choosing to speak not as a symbol, but as a witness. In later decades, Schloss dedicated herself to education and remembrance. She wrote memoirs detailing her experiences and spoke at schools and universities around the world. Her approach was measured and factual, focusing on the consequences of intolerance and the responsibility of memory. She believed that testimony was not about reliving pain, but about preventing its repetition. Those who heard her speak often remarked on her clarity, restraint, and unwavering sense of purpose. Eva Schloss passed away on the 3rd of January 2026, at the age of 96. She died in London, England. No specific cause of death was publicly disclosed. Her life stands as a reminder that survival carries its own responsibility to remember, to speak, and to ensure that history's darkest truths are neither softened nor forgotten. When we look back at these 10 lives, what stands out is not fame alone, but purpose. Each of them followed a different path through art, music, storytelling, service, or survival, yet all left something meaningful behind. Their legacies were not built in a single moment, but across years of quiet dedication, discipline, and conviction. In remembering them, we are reminded that impact is not measured only by visibility, but by the lives touched along the way. Which story stayed with you the most? And if thoughtful remembrance matters to you, subscribing is always appreciated. Thank you for taking this moment with us.